Welcome to the Defining Moments Black Men series of the Authentic Joe Show. It is my honor and privilege to welcome the Reverend Dr. William Knight. How are you, sir?
I am wholly, completely, and totally blessed.
Yes, you are. Thank you so much for being here. We greatly appreciate it.
It's my joy. I appreciate the invitation.
Thank you. Can you please tell us a little about yourself, your occupation, and your background?
Okay. Born in Memphis, Tennessee, raised in Cleveland, Ohio, but I graduated Cal State Hayward, taught college for a year. Then I spent the next 30 years in show business in Los Angeles and around the world. And then 28 years ago, I was ordained as a minister and began my ministry. And I ministered for 28 years. And then at the end of last year, I retired. And now I'm exploring the world and the possibilities of allowing myself to be whatever it is that I am as a retired person.
That is fantastic. It sounds glorious.
Yeah.
Okay. How would you describe yourself?
I am a son, a brother, an uncle, a friend, a teacher, a counselor, a singer, a writer, composer, writer, director, a friend in need. Pretty much that's it, I think.
Okay, that's a lot. Thank you. Thank you. If you had to pick a phrase that would be the theme for your life, what would that be?
Don't be afraid. Step out on faith.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
And clearly you've been doing that.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Oftentimes people will say, well, what is a defining moment? So let me share. A defining moment is a point in life when a pivotal decision must be made or when an experience fundamentally changes a person. What defining moment would you be willing to share with us today?
As I was thinking about your invitation and how I would respond, several defining moments presented themselves. Mm-hmm. But in the context of this month, which is celebrating the history and the reality of how do we as Black men navigate our way in this context of the United States. And the thing that really struck me was how I responded to the death of my older brother. My older brother was essentially my hero. He was an incredible human being, talented, gifted, beautiful, strong, wonderful family, great community person, served on the international board of Kiwanis. I mean, he was literally a model citizen in so many ways. Honored by all of his fraternities and his community organizations. He was that kind of spectacular person. And I always looked up to him. And he was he was in Vietnam. And during the time that he was in Vietnam, he was exposed to Agent Orange. And as a result, years later, it became a chronic illness that caused him to transition. And he transitioned on Palm Sunday. And then we had his memorial service on Easter Sunday. And after that, I left the ministry that I had been serving in and took a position on the Big Island of Hawaii. And I didn't know that God was leading the Big Island of Hawaii because I was so broken with grief that I needed a healing experience. And I didn't know how to even express the fact that my heart was broken and I was dealing with a level of grief that I didn't know how to process. And I'm a counselor. I've sat across the desk from people who were grieving, and I have offered as whatever comfort I could and offered whatever hope that I could, but there was a level of grief in my heart that I couldn't speak to myself. You know, I knew the words and I could speak the words, but they didn't penetrate into my soul. I was still grieving. And even as a professional, there's a stigma in saying I need help.
Yes.
There's somehow you feel you're less than if you need help. Now, if you broke your leg, you wouldn't have any problem going to the doctor. But when your heart is broken and when your spirit is in turmoil, somehow or another, we feel less than if we say, I need some help. And so the defining moment for me was when I realized that if I was going to navigate my way through this enormous grief, I was going to have some help. And so I made a decision that I was going to seek professional help. And so I sought out a therapist. And it was an extraordinary moment for me because up until then, I said, me and God can handle anything.
Yes.
And if I pray enough, and if I meditate enough, and if I get quiet enough, and if it gets still enough, I can get through this. And then God spoke to me and said, I have created this for you. I've created help for you. Why would you deny me by denying the help that I have created for you? And so once I accepted that the help that I needed was God,
yes,
it was still me and God, but it was just God expressing in a way that I was not comfortable with because I had never experienced it before. But once I opened my heart and my mind to say, God can speak to me through people who care about me, people who are willing to share their expertise with me, people who are willing to share their learning with me. That's how God can communicate with me. Because the truth of the matter is, I am so glad that, God is not a face in the clouds. Because if I looked outside and there was a cloud and a big God face in it, I would not be a happy guy. I'm much more comfortable accepting that God will speak to me through God's creation, through God's people, through God's nature, through God's sunshine, that God speaks in an infinite number of ways because God's infinite. Yes. And so once I was able to release my fear, because it was my own fear, my fear of judging myself, of being not wise enough and not smart enough and not strong enough. Once I was able to release that and say, God, I need help. If I am going to heal from this, I need help. And as God always does, God sent the help. And in the sessions where I was able to understand that it was not just the grief of my brother's transition, but that grief was piled on the top of my mother's transition and my father's transition and my favorite aunt's transition and the people that I loved and all of the people who had been a part of my experience during the AIDS years. All of that was compounded and piled on top of the other. And when he made his transition, that simply boiled over the pot. And I was no longer able to contain the pot because it was too full. And because I had never dealt with those other griefs,
yes,
that one grief poured on top of the unresolved griefs just made it more than I was able to handle. And so in that process of working with the therapist and talking through all of those unresolved communications, the things that we don't say to our loved ones, and then one day they're not there and we can't say them. When you're carrying that as part of your being, when something like that occurs, it just adds on to it and makes it unbearable. So in the process of therapy, I was able to contextualize all those separate grieves that hadn't been dealt with.
Yes.
And deal with each of those. And once I was able to deal with those, then his was not so unbearable. So the lesson was, and you know, being a being a pastor, at some point I always have to have some scripture, and the one that says, "Physician, heal thyself."
Yes.
You know, my desire, of course, was to be of service to others, but I couldn't, in my brokenness, I couldn't give them the best of me because the best of me wasn't available.
Yes.
So I had to restore myself to health, restore myself to oneness, restore myself to that place of connection between myself and God in order to be able to share that with someone else.
You said a lot. I can relate to what you're saying, in that when I had a significant death of our mutual loved one, I had to go to counseling. I had to go. I could not deal. And then I realized that I was traumatized. So this is when I was pretty young. What was I? I was in my 30s at that point, early 30s maybe. Yeah, I think it was 2002.
Mm-hmm.
Or 2000. Yeah, 2002. So I knew I needed help. I knew I was broken. And I didn't know where else to go. And I said, somebody has to help me. So I said, well, let me go to counseling. And then I realized, oh, my divorce had piled onto this, trying to date as a young person from the Midwest, living in LA, the city of angels, and all the stuff that came with that. And then I was like, wow. And one of the best things he told me to do was to write a letter to my loved one and say everything I wanted to say as if I was going to mail it. Right. And that was one of the most amazing things. And it helped me. And now as a coach and things like that, when I talk to people, I encourage people to write. And of course, back then we didn't know I would write books and all that stuff. Right. So I think it was really helpful. And in speaking with you as a Black man and a man, there seems to be such resistance to the counseling, and I came to you for counsel. People came to you every day for counsel. So what was your deal? I mean, it's just hard as a woman.
Yeah, because part of the way that we self-define as men is that our strength requires us to be able to overcome any situation. The way that we self-define, the way that not only the way that we're taught by society to self-identify, but the way that we are taught by the family unit to self-identify. Boys don't cry. Stop that crying. You know? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
And boys, stop that. People to think you a sissy. All of those things compound into the way that we begin to process the way experiences happen in our lives. And so the resistance is, oh, I can't be weak because then I'm not a man anymore. I can't shed these unshed tears because now I'm no longer a man. I'm no longer strong. I'm no longer the alpha. I'm now a weak person. And what that does is that puts a barrier between you and what you're actually feeling, what you're actually experiencing is walled off behind that persona that you're taught that you have to maintain in order to be a man, especially a Black man. So that wall is absolutely definable, and it's also destructive.
Thank you. If you had to give 3 pieces of advice, and I'm not going to restrict you, so either to your younger self or a man today of any age, 3 pieces of advice that you would give them that could perhaps help them in their decisions and things like that. What 3 pieces of advice would you give?
The first is you are not alone. Part of the terror that I think many of us subconsciously live with is that somehow we're going to be left alone, and that once we're left alone, we're going to be found wanting, that somehow or another our aloneness is not going to be sufficient to deal with whatever life throws at us. And so the first thing I would encourage people to understand is you are not alone. You were not created alone. Mm. You were not born alone. Mm-hmm. And you are never alone. There's a power, presence, and activity within you that is always with you because it is you. It can no longer be separate from you, like your breath cannot be separate from you. So recognizing that you are one with something that is greater than yourself. Okay. So no matter if you are physically, isolated from other human beings, mm-hmm. It is not a human being that you are one with. You are one with a spirit that cannot be isolated from you. Okay. And that allows you to be in that space of oneness in which I think there is strength. Okay. Second, you are enough. You are enough. We are taught as males that life is a competition and that we have to struggle to get ahead. We have to fight to get ahead. And if somebody gets ahead of us, that means that we've lost and they've won. This is not a competition. This is your own individual journey. And your own individual journey has your own individual staircase, and no one else is on it. The only one who can climb that staircase is you. And your success depends on the steps that you're willing to take. It doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. You're not in competition with anyone else. Mm-hmm. This is not a game. This is your life. And if you are willing to accept the fact that I am responsible for taking the steps necessary for me to live my life, I'm enough because I'm the one climbing the stairs. Mm-hmm. If I climb fast, great. If I want to rest, great. If I decided to sprint up the stairs, that's great. Because the only one that I'm competing against is my own belief in who I am and in my vision of what God has called me to be. Mm.
That is powerful.
Okay. So you're not alone. You're enough. And the third thing I would advise is really love is the answer. Yes. Whatever the question, love is the answer. Loving yourself, loving your family, loving the choices that you have made. Because even the ones that didn't turn out the way that you wanted them to turn out, love the lesson that you learned. Love the fact that you don't have to make that decision again because you know it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. But love is the answer to whatever it is that shows up in your, love your way through it, because I've tried fighting my way through it.
Yes.
it doesn't work.
No.
I've tried angering my way through it. Doesn't work. I've tried crying my way through it. Doesn't work. The only thing that works is loving my way through it. Loving yourself, loving God, loving your fellow persons, and loving your journey, because it's your journey. That's your gift from God. Your journey is your gift, and your gift makes a way for you.
That is so beautiful. Reverend William, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for not only what you shared today, but who you have been to me in my life. It's been many years since we've seen each other face to face. I mean, many years, like 20 years.
It could have been yesterday. Could have been yesterday.
And we both changed a little bit.
Just the tiniest bit. Maybe just a little around the eyes.
And a little around this. But I want to thank you. There are people who come into our lives, and if I would say defining moments, the classes you taught at our church and your preaching and your ministry through song and your wise counsel, and even your wise counsel you gave me before we pressed record. I value you so much. And I want to thank you for the contributions you continue to make in the lives of those you touch. And when I get ready to give up, I think about your smiling face. I think about your wisdom. I think about something that you would say positive. And then I'm like, okay, Jolena, stop fighting, get it together and keep going. So I just want to thank you for that. Thank you for taking this time. I know you have lots of adventures to go on. So I wish you the very, very best, and just send us a postcard or something, you know, put something on Facebook. Let us see where you are, you know. And,
well, the wonderful thing is that through electronics, it doesn't matter where you are physically, you can be together like this.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So before we go, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
One of the things that I think that's important for us as men and as Black men is not to allow the society to define us in ways that harm us. Don't allow anyone else to box you in so that your aspirations, your hopes, your desires are defined by someone else. Your gift has been given to you by a higher power. Allow that to guide you and to direct you and to follow that, because if you follow your heart, follow your dream, follow your hope, follow your aspirations, there's a power and presence that will support you in that. And if you're true to that, you don't have to worry about what anybody else is going to say, what anybody else is going to think, because as I said earlier, if God opens the door for you, nobody can shut it. But if God closes the door, stop trying to go through it. Okay.
And so it is. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you.